Hey there, fellow bookworms. Welcome to Bookish Dives, the show where we take your reading list and we try to extract, the most valuable, actionable insights. You could think of us as like your own personal Cliff's Notes, but way more fun, right?
Definitely more fun.
And so for our very first deep dive, we're cracking open Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. It's a guide for creatives, the digital age.
It really is. And it flips the script on like traditional self-promotion.
It does, yeah. And I think that's what makes it so relevant, especially today, right? We're just bombarded with messages telling us to, build our brand and hustle harder. But Kleon, offers this refreshing alternative, right? Just be open, be generous, and focus on the process.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things that I think is most striking in the book is this idea of the scenius as opposed to like the lone genius.
Right.
So Kleon argues that creativity is rarely a solo act. It's more like a collaborative ecosystem where everyone contributes, right? You're bouncing ideas off each other, inspiring and pushing each other forward.
Yeah, and how can our listener tap into their own genius?
Yeah.
It feels a little abstract, right?
It doesn't have to be. So think about the online communities that you're already a part of. Facebook groups, subreddits, Discord servers, these are all potential geniuses hubs.
Okay.
But it's not just about passively consuming content.
Right.
It's about actively participating, asking questions, sharing your own work, and engaging in meaningful conversations.
So it's not enough to just lurk in the shadows, hoping to be discovered. You have to actually, show your work.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key takeaway from the book, embracing your amateur status.
Okay.
Kleon argues that amateurs often have an advantage.
Interesting.
Because they're more willing to experiment, to learn in the open, and to put themselves out there without the fear of, looking stupid.
Right.
He even quotes Chaplin, who says, "We don't live long enough to be anything else."
I love that quote.
Yeah.
It's so true. And it ties in perfectly with Kleon's emphasis on documenting your process rather than just focusing on the finished product. He suggests that you shift your mindset from making art to documenting your journey.
And this is where things get really practical. Kleon suggests keeping a work journal, a scrapbook, taking photos, shooting videos. Your phone is a multimedia studio, after all.
It really is these days, yeah.
The act of documenting it not only builds self-awareness, but it also gives you this treasure trove of material to share later.
That's so smart. What if I'm just not ready to share my work with the world yet? I mean, some of my creative endeavors are, let's just say, a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, Kleon would say, share anyway. He believes that. Even those rough drafts, right, they can be valuable. They give your audience a behind-the-things glimpse into your process.
Okay.
And they can also help you track your own growth over time.
So it's almost like giving your audience a backstage pass to your creative journey, right? Words and all.
Yes.
And this brings us to the idea of daily dispatches.
Yes.
It's not just about sharing finished work, but those small, insightful glimpses into your day-to-day process.
Think of it like those DVD extras you get with movies,
Okay.
those behind-the-scenes snippets, the director's commentary. It adds a whole new layer of depth and understanding to the final product.
Right. Okay. I could see how that would be interesting. But wouldn't sharing daily updates be kind of spammy?
That's where the so what test comes in.
Okay.
Before you hit that share button, you ask yourself, is this helpful? Is it entertaining? Is it something you'd be okay with anyone seeing? Including your grandma or your boss.
Right.
The simple question can help you avoid oversharing and ensure that what you put out there actually has value.
Right. Yeah. So it's not just about blasting out content just for the sake of it.
Right.
It's about being mindful of your audience.
Right.
And respecting their time and attention.
Exactly.
But what about those of us who aren't comfortable with social media? I mean, I love the idea of sharing my process, but the thought of putting myself out there on Twitter or Instagram makes me break out in hives.
Kleon actually addresses this. He says you don't have to be on every platform, right?
Okay.
Find what feels right for you and what aligns with your goals. Maybe it's a blog, a newsletter, or even just sharing your work with a small group of friends or colleagues.
Okay.
The key is consistency.
Got it.
Choose a platform, and stick with it.
That makes a lot of sense. Don't spread yourself too thin, trying to be everywhere at once. Focus on quality over quantity.
Exactly. And as you consistently share your work, you'll start to build what Kleon calls stock, which is those more lasting pieces of content that you can continue to draw from and repurpose over time.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. We've got flow, which are those daily updates, those little nuggets of insight, and then we've got stock, which are the meatier pieces of content. How do we actually turn those daily dispatches into something more substantive, something that can really make an impact?
That's where some strategic thinking comes in. For example, let's say you're a musician and you've been sharing snippets of your songwriting process on Instagram. You can take those snippets and flesh them out into full songs and then release them as an EP or an album.
Got it.
Or maybe you're a writer and you've been posting daily writing prompts on Twitter. You could compile those prompts into a book or an online course. Like, the possibilities are endless.
So it's like taking those raw ingredients, right, those little sparks of creativity, and like transforming them into, a finished dish.
Exactly.
And that leads us to the importance of storytelling.
Yes. Kleon emphasizes this over and over again. It's not just about sharing what you do, but also about sharing why you do it.
Right.
What inspires you, what challenges you face, and what lessons you've learned along the way. He even provides a fun fairy tale Mad Lib structure as a way to analyze and brainstorm stories.
So you're saying that even if I'm not writing a novel or making a movie, storytelling is still a crucial skill for anyone who wants to connect with an audience.
Absolutely. Think about it. When you're pitching a project, applying for a job, or even just trying to convince your friends to watch a certain movie, you're essentially telling a story. You're trying to capture their attention, engage their emotions, and leave them wanting more.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. We've got the seniors, embracing our amateur status, documenting our process, sharing daily dispatches, turning flow into stock, and the power of storytelling. It's like a recipe for creative success in the digital age.
And the beauty of it is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
You can tailor these principles to your own unique personality, your goals, and your creative endeavors.
So how can our listener figure out what works best for them? I mean, it's easy to get overwhelmed with all these ideas.
Kleon suggests starting small.
Okay.
Pick one principle that resonates with you and experiment with it. Maybe it's documenting your process for a week, sharing a daily dispatch on Twitter, or connecting with someone new in your online community.
Right.
The key is to take action and see what happens.
Don't let analysis paralysis hold you back. Just dive in and start experimenting.
Yes. Yeah. And as you're experimenting, remember that show your work is all about being generous.
Right.
It's about sharing your influences, the books, the music, the art, the people, the experiences that have shaped your creative journey.
Right. It's like that saying, you are what you eat, but for creativity.
Exactly. Kleon encourages us to open up our cabinet of curiosities, to give people a glimpse into our world and what inspires us. He even quotes Dave Grohl, who famously said, "If you theme like something, like it.
Yeah.
No apologies necessary."
I love that. Embrace your passions, even the so-called guilty pleasures. But what about giving credit where credit is due? I mean, the internet is notorious for, shall we say, borrowing ideas without attribution.
Right, yeah. And Kleon is adamant about this. He says it's not just about respecting the original creator, but it's also about providing context for your audience.
Okay.
So when you share something that inspires you, link back to the source, whether it's a book, an article, a song, or even just a tweet. Think of it as leaving a breadcrumb trail for others to follow.
So we're not just sharing cool stuff. We're also curating a collection of resources for our audience to explore. It's like building a digital library of inspiration.
Exactly. And speaking of inspiration, let's talk about teaching.
Okay.
Kleon argues that one of the best ways to solidify your own understanding of a subject is to teach it to others.
That makes sense. I remember struggling with algebra in high school until I started tutoring my younger brother. And then suddenly, it all clicked. But isn't there a risk that sharing your knowledge will give away, your secret sauce?
Cleon addresses this concern head-on.
Okay.
He uses the example of Aaron Franklin, the legendary pitmaster at Franklin Barbecue here in Austin.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Franklin is known for his insanely delicious brisket.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And yet, he's incredibly open about sharing his techniques and recipes.
That's fascinating. You'd think he'd want to guard his secrets closely, right? Especially in such a competitive field.
Right, but Franklin recognizes that. Teaching doesn't diminish his expertise. In fact, it enhances it by sharing his knowledge. He's not only helping others, but he's also generating more interest in his craft and attracting new customers.
Okay, I see how that works. The rising tide lifts all boats. But let's be honest, there are people out there who are all about self-promotion, right? Constantly blasting out content, but never taking the time to engage with others. Kleon calls this human spam.
Right.
What are some telltale signs of this behavior, and how can our listener avoid falling into this trap?
Well, human spam is essentially the opposite of everything Kleon advocates for. In the book, they're the folks who treat social media as a one-way broadcasting platform.
Okay.
They're constantly talking at their audience instead of talking with them.
Right.
They rarely ask questions, respond to comments, or show genuine interest in what others are doing.
They're like those annoying telemarketers who just keep talking, even when you've politely asked them to stop calling.
Exactly. And the best way to avoid becoming human spam is to simply be a good citizen in your online community. Engage with others, ask questions, leave thoughtful comments, share your own work, but also be willing to celebrate the successes of others. It's about building relationships, not just collecting followers.
So it's about quality over quantity. And speaking of quality, how important is it to meet our online friends? In real life, Kleon calls it IRL, in real life.
He believes it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
There's something magical that happens when you take those online connections offline. Suddenly those avatars and usernames become real people with real stories and real lives.
It's like those pen pal relationships from back in the day, so, except now we have social media. To facilitate those connections, have you had any cool IRL experiences with your online friends?
Actually, yes. Just recently, I met up with a group of fellow podcast enthusiasts I'd been chatting with online for months. We had a blast geeking out over our favorite shows, sharing ideas, and just enjoying each other's company.
That's awesome.
It was amazing to finally put faces to names and to have those deep, nerdy conversations that we couldn't have online.
I love that. It's a reminder that these online connections can blossom into real-life friendships, and those friendships can enrich both our personal and professional lives. And speaking of professional lives, Kleon has some interesting thoughts on the idea of selling out. He challenges the traditional negative connotations and reframes it in a more empowering light.
Absolutely. He argues that selling out can simply mean people value what I do enough to pay for it.
Right.
It's about recognizing the worth of your work and finding ways to make it sustainable. And honestly, isn't it a good thing when people are willing to pay for your creativity? It validates your hard work and it allows you to keep doing what you love.
It's like that moment when your hobby becomes your career. So how does Kleon suggest creatives navigate this tricky terrain, right, of monetizing their work without compromising their artistic integrity?
He discusses various monetization models, including donations, crowdfunding, and traditional sales.
Okay.
But regardless of the model you choose, Kleon emphasizes the importance of building an email list.
Right.
It's direct line of communication with your most supportive audience, the people who are most invested in what you do.
Okay.
It allows you to build relationships, share your work, and even sell your products or services without relying solely on social media algorithms.
It's like having a VIP club for your biggest fans.
Exactly. And it's a much more sustainable approach in the long run.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from embracing our amateur status to building a stock of valuable content, and even navigating the tricky world of monetization. But how do we keep the momentum going, especially when we hit those inevitable creative rugs?
Kleon has a fantastic analogy for this. He talks about chain smoking your work.
Okay.
Using the energy of finishing one project to ignite the next.
Interesting.
Don't wait for validation or perfection. Just keep creating, keep exploring, keep pushing yourself forward.
It's like building a creative fire and keeping it stoked with new ideas and new challenges, But even fires need oxygen to burn, right?
And that's where sabbaticals come in.
Okay.
Kleon emphasizes the importance of taking breaks, even brief ones, to recharge your creative batteries.
Okay.
He cites Gina Trapani, who suggests 3 brain-off spots: your commute, exercise, and nature. Find those moments in your day where you can step away from the screen, disconnect from the digital world, and let your mind wander.
Those moments of disconnection are so crucial for creative renewal. It's like hitting the reset button on our brains.
Exactly. And when you come back to your work after a sabbatical, you'll often find that you have fresh eyes, new perspectives, and a renewed sense of purpose.
So we've talked about embracing our amateur status, the power of teaching, avoiding human spam, monetizing our work, and the importance of sabbaticals. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
Kleon brings it full circle, back to that idea of the amateur.
Okay.
He encourages us, even when we've achieved a level of mastery in our field, to seek out new challenges, new things to learn, new ways to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones.
It's inspiring to think that, like, we can all be part of this larger creative conversation, right?
Yeah.
Contributing our unique voices and perspectives. But I think one of the things that makes Show Your Work so powerful is that Kleon acknowledges the messy, unpredictable nature of creative work. It's not always about, those big splashy moments of inspiration, and it's often about showing up day after day, putting in the work, even when it feels mundane or frustrating.
Yeah, he talks about embracing those in-between stages, those times when you're not sure what you're doing or where you're going.
Right.
And he reminds us that those are often the times when the most valuable learning happens.
Okay.
When we're forced to experiment, problem solve, think outside the box.
It's like those times when you're lost in the woods and you have to, use your intuition and your resourcefulness to find your way back to the trail.
Exactly. It's about trusting the process even when it feels chaotic or uncertain. And it's about recognizing that failure is an inevitable part of the creative journey.
Right.
In fact, it's often a necessary stepping stone to success.
I think a lot of creatives struggle with this, myself included. We tend to be perfectionists. And we're so afraid of failure that we sometimes hold ourselves back from taking risks or putting our work out there.
Yeah, and Kleon has some great advice for this. He encourages us to learn to take a punch.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of developing resilience, of not letting criticism or setbacks derail us.
Right.
It reminds us that the more we put ourselves out there, the more we open ourselves up to both praise and criticism. And that's okay. It's part of the game.
It's like building those calluses on your hands when you first start playing guitar. It's painful at first, but eventually those calluses protect you and allow you to play for longer periods of time without discomfort. So how can our listener develop this creative resilience? It sounds like a superpower.
It starts with recognizing those negative thought patterns, those inner voices that tell us we're not good enough, that our work isn't worthy of being shared. Kleon encourages us to challenge those voices, to replace them with more positive, self-affirming beliefs.
It's like having a coach in your corner, cheering you on, even when you're doubting yourself. But what about those times when the criticism comes from external sources? How do we deal with those punches?
Kleon suggests using the vampire test.
Okay.
If someone's feedback leaves you feeling drained, discouraged, or depleted, it's probably best to ignore it. I think encountering an energy vampire, they suck the life out of you and leave you feeling depleted.
So we need to learn to discern the valuable feedback from the toxic noise, surround ourselves with supportive people, and tune out the haters.
Exactly. And remember, you can always hit that block button. If someone is being truly abusive or harassing, your mental health is paramount.
Absolutely. Protecting our creative energy is essential. But it's not always easy to do this alone. Sometimes we need a little help from our friends.
Kleon agrees. He emphasizes the importance of having a support system in place, a group of fellow creatives who understand the joys and struggles of the creative path.
Yep.
These are the people who will celebrate your successes, offer constructive criticism, and provide a shoulder to cry on when things get tough.
They're like our creative cheer squad, reminding us why we started this journey in the first place, and they help us remember that. Creativity is not a zero-sum game. There's room for everyone to shine.
Yeah, it's about fostering a spirit of collaboration and mutual support, lifting each other up, and celebrating each other's successes.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Show Your Work, what's one key takeaway you hope our listener will carry with them?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Don't wait for permission to be creative. Don't wait for validation. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start sharing your work, your process, your journey with the world.
It's about embracing the messy, imperfect, beautiful process of creativity and recognizing that we all have something valuable to contribute.
And as we continue to explore the world of books here on Bookish Dives, we'll keep encouraging you to do just that, to take these insights, these nuggets of wisdom, and turn them into something meaningful, something that helps you grow and thrive as a creative individual.
Absolutely. So until next time, happy reading, happy creating, and keep showing your work. 36.